Hey there, everybody. Welcome into a Friday edition of ESPN FC's Extra Time. I always do it. Why are you surprised? Steve Nicol and Sebi here in studio. We got Sid, Lowe, and Aage Fjortoft with us as well, plus a great rack of questions. Sid, first one's for you. El Clasico coming up this weekend. What will Zidane do with the starting lineup and for the second leg against Liverpool? Will he keep the same team for all three games, or will there be a rotation?
Well, I think part of the answer here was given by Vinicius after the game against Liverpool in midweek. He was asked by the touchline reporter immediately as he came off the pitch. He said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how tired are you? And he said, 10. And so I think that tells you that Zidane will want to change players. He'll want to make sure that it's not the same team after every single game. And Zidane does nearly always surprise us. Even if it's only with one player, there is some sort of surprise in there. So I would expect some rotation through the games. I would expect a different team against Barcelona to the one that played against Real Madrid in midweek. And one player I do expect to see that we of course only saw as a sub in midweek would be Fede Valverde.
Real Madrid, tired out. Maybe like a week later, Stevie Don could be right.
Well, Don's going to be right eventually, let's be honest.
Not with percentages.
No, not with percentages, but just in general, eventually he's going to get something right.
Right. That tends to happen on this show from time to time. Jan, you mentioned that if Robert Lewandowski was available for Bayern in the game against PSG, they would have scored at least 5 goals. Don't you think the availability of Marco Verratti would have had the same impact on PSG's performance in that game?
No,
Why?
it wouldn't, because the game, if people saw the game, this was an unbelievable game. I mean, I so much respect of the efficiency of PSG, Mbappe on fire and so on, but the chances and the pressure of Bayern, I'm 100%, maybe we would have scored 6 in that game, because there were games to be brought down from a tree in there. It was Moting scored, Choupo-Moting scored. That is you just add 5 to that to Lewandowski, whatever Moting doing. He's doing his best he can. He did a good game in Leipzig as well. He do whatever he can. No, Verratti, great player, but he's Lewandowski much more influential and decisive for Bayern Munich.
Stevie, it really was a good game, like a fun game to watch as a neutral. Maybe the best we've seen in a while. Yeah, like the big games have been such a letdown recently.
Yeah, but for a neutral, yes.
Yeah.
But for a coach or somebody who's into the tactics,
were you pulling your
then
hair
you're
out
thinking,
there?
hold on a second, how is this possible?
Right.
All these chances, all these shots, all these saves, all these misses. It depends. What your particular taste is.
Sid, is there any worries at Atletico Madrid that Joao Felix could really look to leave this summer and that Luis Suarez would move on at the same time?
Yep, there's worries about both of those things. I think in the case of Luis Suarez, it's slightly different, of course, because there's an awareness of his age, there's an awareness of the conditions of his knees, and I think they would feel that if he was to move on, particularly, of course, if in the meantime they've managed to win the league and he's contributed, which he's doing with huge numbers of goals, then I think they would think that this was well worth it. It was a free transfer. He came, he gave fantastic service for 1 year, and everybody's reasonably happy about that. I think with Joao Felix, of course, it has a whole new dimension, and that's the dimension of this was the guy that they hoped could be among the best 5, 6, 7 players in the world, that was young, that was going to grow up at the club, that was going to become a superstar with them, and for whom, by the way, they spent 126 million euros for a kid. It's an enormous amount of money for any club, and for a club like Atletico Madrid even more so. And I think there's a real concern that they have only seen the best of him in moments, that they haven't seen the continuity. There's a concern about the possibility of his relationship with Simeone not being quite right, if not necessarily on a personal level, then on a playing level, on a stylistic level. Is this the right kind of player for this kind of manager? And so I think there is a very significant concern, that Joao Felix would depart, but not just that, but that what that departure would mean if he did so.
But Sid, if you spend 126 million euro on a player and maybe Simeone don't like his way of playing, tell me about the recruiting policy at Atletico Madrid.
Well, look, this is like a lot of Spanish clubs, and you know, this is something that, from a British point of view, obviously for years has been seen as slightly odd, because in Britain we had the culture, if you like, of the manager choosing who to sign. Spanish clubs are run in terms of recruitment normally by either a recruitment department or a sporting director or a technical secretary, and not normally by the manager. Now, it then depends on the relationship between those members of staff and the manager. But also in the case of Atletico Madrid, it's about the sense of if you like, kind of ambition, the sense of excitement about a young player, the sense that you speak to a manager about it. He says, well, we'll try and make this work. We will try and see if this fits. But everybody knew that on the face of it, at least, this was slightly out of keeping with the kind of players they had before. But Atletico Madrid have been trying to evolve into this for a while. And so I think it wasn't necessarily as much of a disconnect as it now appears, but at the same time, watching it now, that's the thing, as you rightly say, talk about the recruitment, you could kind of see it maybe coming, but I think there is a risk that ends up blaming it too much on Simeone, because I think obviously, as Simeone has tried to make clear, and I think as others have as well, Joao Felix has to do his part too in all of this.
But don't you think though, Sid, at the end of the day, your sporting directors now are trying to become just as influential as the manager. So is the sporting director going to go upstairs and say, listen, I've brought in this guy in particular, let's use Joao Felix as an example. I've brought this guy in, but yet the manager here doesn't know how to use his ability. Is he not going to try and point the finger at Simeone? And if he does, I mean, what's the chances of Simeone going if they, which I think they will, blow this league title?
Well, I mean, look, as you say, you can use Joao Felix just an example of a mechanical scenario that happens at lots of clubs, and that's about the relationship between that sporting director and the manager. It's also about the chain of command, by the way. And of course, in theory at least, the sporting director is the manager's boss. So in theory at least, he then decides what happens to the manager in the event that he feels that the manager is not getting the best out of the players that he has brought in. He may also feel that, by the way, that he's made a mistake, that the manager has tried, and okay, the best thing to do is to resolve this. But at a club like Atletico Madrid, with the strength and significance and, if you like, the symbolism of Simeone, then it becomes a very, very much more difficult decision. If you sack Simeone, or if you try and encourage a change there, maybe you come to some sort of mutual agreement, the impact of that, the if you like, the fallout from it is far greater, I think, at the moment in Spain than any other manager departing any other club. And going back 20, 30 years, I really struggle to think of a manager since Cruyff at least who's been such a big figure at a club he only is now.
But it's quite interesting, boys. It's quite interesting, boys, because we've talked about Bayern Munich and the fight there between Salihamidzic and Flick, and it's a part of that. But it's a fair point to say that Simeone got a much more power and a position in their club, but he had some similarities, because now Boateng, I mean, he's done his games. He won all the titles, and people thought they would get a 1 more year contract to kind of reward him for that. But this time, no, get him out, and that is advantage Salihamidzic and his big supporter Uli Hoeneß.
That's a good point Sid makes, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a whole series of other points of pressure and conflict as well at any club. There's lots of interest going on, and bear in mind, I think it's probably worth noting something here. Joao Felix is represented by a certain Portuguese agent, whose relationship with Atletico Madrid at the very, very highest level is extremely close. And so then that doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that more of his players come in. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that the players that do come in will succeed or will even be given opportunities to succeed. But what it does mean, of course, is it provides an extra point at which there can be fault lines, an extra point at which there can be pressure applied in terms of what the solution is to something that's not a crisis by any means. Because I think Joao Felix can still be a great player at Atletico Madrid, but certainly there is a point of kind of, what would you call it, disconnect there at very least.
Yeah, good point.
Just enjoying the latest edition of Atletico Madrid TV here. Stevie, if you were Tuchel, would you scrap the Werner experiment? Clearly out of form and has better options in Pulisic, Ziyech, etc.
Well, I think eventually you have to make a change. Sometimes for the players' sake as well. Sometimes when you keep throwing them out there, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. You're not doing them any favours. And I think also when you have options, you have to use them as well, because your options are sitting watching it, and they're sitting watching a guy who, listen, as a football player, if you're not playing, the only way you accept not playing is if the guy in your position is producing.
Right.
And the minute he stops producing, then you've got a problem. So Tuchel has to be very careful that the boys on the side who are not getting an opportunity, when there's a guy struggling clearly, that becomes a problem just in and around the club, as opposed to what's happening on the field.
Jan, Tuchel has given Werner quite a leash here, should he?
It's quite an interesting player, Timo Werner, because he's normally a goal-getter who always score their goals. But this player, he's a player that who can score two, and then he can have a long period that he had in many seasons not scoring goals, and he's a guy that seems to lose his confidence. So he's a funny kind of goal-getter. I'm not sure that we can call him a goal-getter. We can call him maybe a striker who scores goals. And I think there's also, as well, his personality. He's one of these guys coming to London, coming to a new place. You have the pandemic. You have to adjust and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, it's always what you produce on the pitch. With Pulisic, Aage, and all the other alternatives they have on the bench is going to be tough for him. And Tuchel can maybe give him some German friendship kind of thing for a while. And he's a very expensive player and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, you have to get your goals. And you saw what it was with Germany as well now. That chance he missed against North Macedonia. I mean, that is a fantastic, terrible chance to miss.
I think we called that teacher's pet.
Oh, yeah?
When I was a kid, yeah.
Jan, plenty of options for this question. Most exciting youngster in the Bundesliga. Who you got?
Ooh, that is a... Well, you have the usual suspect. But I think that I don't want to go for Haaland. I don't want to go for Sancho this time, or Musiala at Bayern. I will go for this week's, I think, the best youngsters. That was Bellingham's performance against Manchester City. He was absolutely brilliant. And I can see back on the game against Lazio, the first game they had in the Champions League. And when Sebastian Kehl, the head of sports, said to me, and I said, why are you playing these young kids? This is the first Champions League game. And I said, because we promised him that. We will never get youngsters if we just promise them and not play them. And he had a bad game against Lazio, but he was excellent this week against Manchester City.
Jan, interesting you should choose Bellingham, because your Twitter, it sounds like you thought his goal should have been disallowed against Manchester City.
What happened to the referee there? Why didn't he just leave it for 2 seconds? Okay, check it with VAR, and then but this time, should we use VAR? No, not at all. We blow the whistle as soon as we can. Terrible decision.
Sid, what did you make of it?
Exactly what Jan says. I think it's a bad decision in terms of whether or not it was a foul. I think he was wrong about that. But I can understand that that's something that people can debate about, although I would disagree with anyone who says I'm wrong. But I think the big thing, as Jan says, is the kind of, if you like, the mechanical foolishness. The mechanical foolishness of not giving yourself the chance to get it wrong and be corrected. To not give it that enough of a split second to have a way back. Now, I personally... I'm not particularly a big fan of the VAR, and that's saying it, shall we say, in a soft way. But if you've got the VAR, then it's a tool to be used, and then to do that just struck me as I say, in terms of the decision-making process, the mechanics, the protocol, call it what you want. Not whether or not the decision was right or wrong, although, as I say, I think it was wrong, but not giving yourself the chance to find a way out if you got it wrong.
Sid, you didn't even just think it was wrong, you said it was the worst decision of the season.
I think I didn't call it the worst decision of the season. I think my phrase was an appallingly bad decision.
Okay.
And I'm absolutely sticking with that. Not, as I say, again, not because of whether or not it was a foul, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not a foul. And if we're going to start giving these, then you know, it's over. But just not giving yourself the chance to have another look.
Stevie, who was the toughest player you were ever forced to defend against in a match? Jan, who was the toughest defender you ever went up against? Stevie, start with you.
The guy who gave me the biggest problem that I couldn't figure out, and he's the only one ever, by the way, that I can remember that I couldn't figure out.
You've told me this and I forgot it. He was speedy.
His name is Rafael Gordillo.
Oh, okay.
I played against him a couple of times. I played against him for Scotland against Spain at Hampden Park. And then I played against him at in a friendly Real Madrid. I just couldn't work the guy out. I mean, he's not. He runs awkwardly. He's got an awkward carriage. He's just. His sense of balance is, you know, he's one of those guys you think he's about to fall over, but he's actually revving himself up to run past you. I mean, I couldn't work the guy out.
Right.
Yeah. Fantastic. What a player. Said I'll tell you about him.
Yeah. You knew he had your number.
Yeah.
Did he know it? Like, could you tell he knew it?
Well, I don't speak Spanish, so I couldn't really communicate well, you know.
Sort of your pronunciations around here. Pretty good. Sid, you were smiling while Stevie was telling that story.
Yeah, I was actually just listening to Steve and thinking how much the Spanish would love to hear that, because he's a very, very popular figure, played for Real Betis, played for Real Madrid as well. As Steve says, a little bit unorthodox, maybe not the most graceful of footballers, but there was something about him that I think made people feel an enormous amount of affection for him, and a very, very good footballer from an era in which the Spanish national team always had good players, but of course didn't have the success that would come sort of 10, 15, 20 years later.
Jan, toughest defender you faced?
Well, I think that will be Desailly, the French defender playing for Chelsea. I mean, positioning, good with the ball. And I remember I tried to turn him, tried to look for his shirt, tried to get into his chest, and it was like a brick wall. He was like unbelievable. When I meet him now, sometimes pitch side, I'm nearly afraid of him then. But then I go over to him, make my selfie, and say to him, "You were the toughest defender I've ever met," and he probably don't know who I am. So that is the story of that one. But he was enormous. He was a fantastic defender, the French Desailly.
Jan, you might have just come at the wrong time. You might have just missed these two. But did you ever play against Shotton and Briggs from Oxford?
No.
No.
Well,
tough
guy.
I'll tell you what, a couple of robbers, dogheads that would smash anything and anybody who got in their way. Two centre backs.
But I think it's quite interesting when you're talking about the hardest defenders you played, because you end up want to choose the defenders who were good footballers as well, because you played against someone who was mad, but still Desailly you could respect as a great defender as well. So I think that's why I picked him.
All right, gentlemen, last question.
I don't know, when you start talking about mad defenders, I can't help but sort of think of Terry Hurlock. I don't know if either of you two ever played against Terry Hurlock. That was a
midfield, yeah. Not
old
job.
School, hard, crazy defender, yeah.
Not job.
Last question here from Frank LeBeuf. Stevie. Well, LeBeuf spelled B-U-F-F.
All right.
This is Frank LeBeuf asking Jan.
I was trying to look straight where I'm supposed to here. I didn't know how to look at the question.
He was in the same French team.
It's all very confusing.
Shall we take off a shirt? Shall we take off a shirt?
No, please. Please, none of us look like Frank, I don't think. Stevie, we all know that Don's reading could use an update. Will you consider making your book into a movie so we can make Don happy and he doesn't have to read it?
Do you know, that's a great idea.
I think it would be. Honestly, it's an easy read. I'm sure it'd be a great movie as well.
Great.
Who would play you, Stevie?
There's a question here. Who plays Stevie?
Yeah.
If there's a movie of Stevie, who plays Stevie? I mean, obviously it's Steve McQueen, isn't it? I mean...
Well, I think we get Frank a wig and let Frank do it.
Totally.
Because he would know what to do.
He'd nail the accent for sure.
He would be able to do all the stuff on the field.
Right.
The guy from The Billionaire, what's his name? The guy from The Billionaire, he's a Liverpool fan as well. What's his name? The guy from The Billionaire? Help us! Come on, I need it.
Producer, anybody?
Anybody?
Our producer's frantically scrambling to Google this random actor that you've called up. No, it's got to be a footballer, Stevie. It's got to be a footballer.
Good-looking man, Stevie. Good-looking man.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Sean Connery's not with us anymore.
Damian Lewis. Is that who you're thinking of?
Damian Lewis. Yeah, Damian Lewis.
Of course.
Wow, look at the analysis that you get here on ESPN FC's Extra Time. All right, that's it for us. Enjoy the show over the weekend. Dan is back on Saturday. Plenty to look forward to, including El Clasico.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.